Hey guys, Zomfox here, and today it is time to do the UFL Week 3 review of the 2024 season. This week was one that, well, it's pretty wild. We have a bunch of just highs and lows. Highs, we had two really close games. Lows, we had two games that were pretty much blowouts. Highs, the TV ratings once again were really good. Lows, the attendance was pretty terrible. So without just, stalling, let's get right into this with the scores from this past week. Now, the first game, the Defenders versus the Renegades, the Defenders barely got the W, winning 29-28, in a game nobody really thought they were going to win heading into the fourth quarter. Then, of course, the Showboat Stallions, we had the first real blowout of the season. The game ended 33-14 and was never really close after the first quarter. Then the Panthers and Roughnecks had another blowout, with the Panthers winning 34-20, finally showcasing some offensive talent. And then the final game was a close one. The Battlehawks were able to hold off a comeback by the Brahmas to win 31-24. Now, with that first game, the Defenders versus the Renegades, this was a game that the Renegades statistically just obliterated them. Look, the Renegades were the better team. They should have won. This was one of those instances where the 4th and 12 proved to be the deciding factor. The Defenders were able to get a 4th and 12 play, after they scored a touchdown, gained a few extra yards on it, got one other good pass, and were in field goal range to win the game. The Renegades played a much better game, over 400 yards total, almost 300 passing yards. They were a bit, undisciplined. But what really did them in was their 0-2 on 4th down conversions, which ended up kind of negating the fact that they once again had a really good 3rd down percentage and the fact they had almost 20 more minutes of time possession than the Defenders. This was a game between Perez and Teamu, and Perez is still looking like a legit MVP candidate, as even though he's now 0-3, he once again played as a top 3 quarterback in the league, as he thoroughly outplayed Jordan Teamu, whereas Teamu didn't even have a 50 completion percentage. Perez had a 60 percentage and almost hit 300 yards, almost becoming the first 300-yard passer in the league season. And overall, this was a close game. Both teams kind of ran the ball pretty similar. It was very so that was that game. Now, the next game is the Memphis Showboats versus the Birmingham Stallions, which was an absolute blowout. Look, the Stallions literally had twice as many yards as the Showboats did. Both of them had basically the same amount of penalty yardage. It was just that the Stallions were just a much better team. And it wasn't even actually that. What it really was that the Showboats had no offensive line. The offensive line did nothing. They allowed 8 sacks, and it's why they ended up pulling Case Cookus late in the second half, because it was just you don't want to risk him getting hurt, and they put in T-Will. And even then, he was only able to do so much despite the fact of how mobile he is. This was also Adrian Martinez's coming out party. The fact is he had an unbelievable game. The first 300-yard passer in the United Football League's history, 18-28 for 334, 2 TDs in the air and 1 on the ground. An incredible game. The Stallions' defense just did so much damage to the Showboats. The fact is they were able to get almost 50 yards just on sacks, which is unbelievable. The Stallions were an incredible unit in this game, and they've fully showcased why they are the best team in spring football. Now, the Panthers Roughnecks was the surprise of the week because of the fact that the Panthers offense finally looked good. E.J. Perry had another one of those deep shot bombs to Marcus Sims, and overall had an 84 completion percentage with 200 yards and just 16 completions. Reed Sinet, once again, was better than Garantano, but still wasn't anything special, just kind of okay. The Roughnecks defense, massive disappointment, a couple questionable injuries. I believe Olive Sagapalo is now in the IR. Chris Odom was a little banged up. It's not looking too good for the Roughnecks. They're 0-3, and unlike the Renegades, they're 0-3 despite not really playing good in any game they've played, and are only in games because of just mistakes by the other team. The rushing attack is still non-existent without Mark Thompson, whereas the Panthers, they did see E.J. Perry continue to be a really good source in the ground game, despite the fact that both Colburn and West Hills were not that good. So that's the only concern, but the passing attack for the Panthers is now legit, and it's a very good sign for them. Then the next one is the Battlehawks versus the Brahmas. This game was one that, despite the stats showing it was close, never really felt that way. The Brahmas just kind of were always able to be just in it, because the Battlehawks had to keep settling for long field goals. In the end, though, Chase Garbers, this is his last game, possibly for the season. If you haven't heard, he is on the IR, so he's missing at least 5 weeks. So there is some talk that he could return at the very end of the season, but he is out for a while. And that's a shame. He was playing at MVP level, despite this game not actually playing that well. 27 of 41 for 143 is a really horrid stat line, but he still played efficient. He might not have played actually good, but he played very efficient, and the previous 2 weeks he was playing out of his mind. So he is now gone. We're going to see how Quentin Dormady does, as he's probably going to be the starter. A.J. McCarron didn't even really play that good either. He also was very similar. It was a lot of short dink and dunk kind of stuff. But he still got the job done. The Battlehawks once again had a decent overall run game, with both Durant and Sailors having their ups, having their downs. And overall, they were able to get the W. Again, they didn't really play that much better than the Brahmas, but they still got the W. And now most people would agree they are a top 3 team in the league. Now, the downside is the attendance. The attendance was overall pretty terrible. Now, the one thing is with the Panthers didn't even hit 7,000, but Mike Mitchell did tweet out that naturally, we knew about this. He knew, naturally, we're having to go off his word, but like we've always talked about, him and Larson, you pretty much can't really, they're two of the most trustworthy guys in the, spring football sphere. From what we understand, he knows what the attendance was last year for the Panthers, and apparently this almost 7,000 number is better than last year's Panthers, which is a good sign. It's proof that you do need to keep a team to have their attendance go up, because for some reason everybody keeps thinking that, oh, well, they need to move the Panthers next year. If you move the Panthers, you're basically saying that the UFL is going to fail. You have to keep teams in their same location. Unless you see the attendance go down year after year, you have to keep them there, else nobody else is going to show up. If you move them to, let's say, Oklahoma City, guess what? Nobody in Oklahoma City is going to care because they're just going to expect the team to move in another year or two. So as long as the Panthers continue to go up in attendance, and then when they return home, let's say they're back at 7,500, that's a good sign. It still is a bad number. 10K should be the minimum, but it is what it is. Now the Renegades, huge disappointment. They went from having their best game across the ultra-modern spring football era to having their worst. 14,000 to 8,400. Look, they're 0-2 heading into that game. I know it's not, the opening game, but the fact that they dropped that hard is a really bad sign. That's a bad number. Look, I know wins and losses are a big deal on a team, but the fact is the Renegades have played really good basically all 3 weeks. The only bad time they really played was the second half against the Stallions. So seeing their numbers go that far down is a really bad sign. Now the Brahmas, this is one of those where it's just the hype machine got out of hand. For some reason, people expected them to have 15 to 20K easily, which I'm sorry. I don't know why people expected that. Yes, they're adding deals and all that, but just like we saw last year, guess what? Last year they started at 24,000, then dropped to 13,000. And everybody's like, oh, it's because of the bad start. That's why they dropped. No, the season opener is a big deal, right? It's why the Battlehawks hit that 38K and then dropped. I personally do not expect this next game for the Battlehawks to hit 40K. It's still going to be incredible. It's going to have over 35,000, but I don't think it's going to hit 40K. Why should I if they went down every week last year? So, I mean, the Brahmas still had a good number. 11.8K is not a bad number. It's a good one. But people acting like it's terrible because it wasn't 15K are kind of out of their mind, in my opinion. Again, you can't just expect because they put out a couple deals 5 days before the game that they're just going to get this huge, boost. No, as long as they keep going above 10K, they're doing good. Again, this is a pretty bad number compared to last year, as last year they never had a game under 12,000, but hopefully this is their lowest in the season. We'll see. Now, the Stallions, 12,000, this is a good one. Look, it looked on TV really good. It sounded really good, and it looked better than what they had basically all of last year, aside from maybe one game. Now, I will say that people are saying that their next game is going to hit over 15K because the Alabama A game was, that same day. Again, I don't really buy it. We saw that with, the Easter Sunday with the Brahmas proved to not really be the big deciding factor, and the fact is that this was the marquee matchup for the Stallions. This was Alex Smooth's return. This was the championship banner unveiling. I'd expect next week, or the next game, to hopefully increase to 13,000, but people are probably going to try and make it up to be like, oh, they're going to hit 15K easily, and then are going to be shocked when it doesn't. No, as long as it stays above 12K, you're doing good. So, all in all, you have the Brahmas, Stallions, good, Renegades, horrid, Panthers, And that's pretty much how the attendance was. Now in terms of the TV ratings is where we go back to some of the good. Now, the bad is the ESPN game. The ESPN game had 530,000. People are kind of understating that this was actually a pretty bad number. This is among the lowest that even the XFL had on ESPN last year. I mean, you're talking about a 10:30 p.m. game was one of the only ones that matched this. I mean, even just last week in Week 3, you had games on FX either at 1 p.m. or 7 p.m. that were outdoing this game. So that's a big deal. ESPN is basically the best non-broadcast channel you have, so that was a disappointment. Now, the other games were all really solid. The Fox won 840,000 is a good number. Fox actually struggled to hit 800,000 last year with their USFL games. So still hitting above it by a pretty decent margin and having a 0.5 rating, which does match what some of their highs were last year, is a really good number. Now, the ABC games are really solid. ABC, kind of like every other game, would have a 1.1-ish million for the XFL, but they had a lot fewer of them, so it made them feel more of a big deal event, whereas ABC now is kind of just, a channel. So the fact that both these games had, basically if you even round them out, about 1 million each, and was going against the Masters final day, this is actually a really good number. And you also got to think about it like this. Both the Showboats Stallions and the Panthers Roughnecks probably lost a few thousand people just because they were blowouts. I know I straight up turned off the Stallions Showboats game probably like early fourth quarter, I believe it was, because I was like, you know what, I'm going to go back and watch UFC 300, which also was going at the same time as the Stallion Showboats. So you had one of the biggest MMA events in history, and you had the Masters final day going on at the same time as those final 3 games. So the fact that we're able to do as well as they did is pretty damn solid. So all in all, the TV ratings, aside from ESPN, really good. So that'll do it. This has been ZomFox. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell. Let me know down below what you think about the attendance and TV ratings. What do you guys think about next week having the weird decision to hold 2 games at the same time doing the regional broadcast? And as always, guys, make sure to have a great night.